Hello, my name's Nigel Pease and I'm here at Barnsley College to look at some music production techniques using Pro Tools software. In this clip we're going to look at busing to a reverb. So this would be used commonly to allow a single reverb to be accessed by a number of tracks. That could be a selection of backing vocals wanting to be processed with the same reverb. In the example I'm going to show you, we're going to use a drum kit so that we have the different elements of the drum kit able to be sent to the reverb in varying amounts. So you might have more on the snare than the toms or something like that. Throughout this little demo I'm going to be using some shortcuts, and they'll be Mac based shortcuts because it's a Mac system that we have here at Barnsley. But you will see on screen the Mac and PC equivalents, so that if you're using a PC Pro Tools system you'd know what the shortcuts are. Okay, so what we can see on screen are all the elements of the drum kit and a master fader. So the first thing we need to do is to create an auxiliary input, which is going to be our reverb channel. You can see that the last element of the drum kit is selected, the right overhead. I've selected the name there. The reason I've done that is so that when I create the auxiliary channel, it will be placed next to the drum kit. It'll place it to the right of the selected track. So I'm going to use the shortcut Shift Command N, which opens up the New Tracks dialog, and I'm going to choose an auxiliary input, stereo, and create. And that's created our auxiliary input there. First thing I'm going to do is just double click and name that track, so we'll call this Drum Reverb. Next thing to do is to choose the input source for the auxiliary input. So we'll go to the input section just here, to the drop down, and choose a pair of buses, and we'll choose bus 1 and 2. So anything that's sent to bus 1 and 2 will get to this auxiliary input. Last thing to do for the reverb channel is to create the reverb itself. So we go up to the to the insert section here at the top, and we're going to choose a multi-channel deverb. So that's there. I'm just going to turn up the input of deverb. As I said earlier, we're going to use extreme settings so we're sure we can hear the reverb happening. Okay, so that reverb channel is now there. What we need to do now is enable all of these drum tracks to be able to send signal to that reverb. So I'm going to click on the kick drum there, and holding down Shift, I'll click on the last element of the drum kit, the right overhead, and that's selected all elements of the drum kit. Now we go up to the sends up here, and I'm going to use a shortcut Shift and Option, click, and choose the same pair of buses, bus 1 and 2. By holding down that Shift Option, it's enabled me to select a bus send for all the tracks that were selected by having their names highlighted at the bottom. So all elements of the drum kit have been given a bus 1 and 2 send at the same time. It's opened up automatically a little fader down here. I'm just going to close that. We're not going to use that at the moment. So we're all set. We have an auxiliary send to bus 1 and 2, and we have a reverb channel listening to bus 1 and 2 with deverb inserted on it. Before we put any reverb on, let's just have a listen to the drums without any reverb. So that's the dry drums. The beauty of this method of applying reverb is, as I said before, all of the tracks can send signal to this reverb, but in varying amounts. So if I put some reverb onto the snare drum by turning up the little auxiliary send fader for the snare drum track, if we listen to that again now, we'll hear reverb on the snare, but not on any other element of the kit. And obviously we can now apply reverb in varying amounts to the different elements. So for instance, we might want to put a little bit of reverb on the toms, but not as much as on the snare. So we'll just try that again. And so on. So there we are. Each individual track has its own auxiliary send. Those auxiliary sends are sending signal down the appropriate buses to be received by the auxiliary input that has the reverb inserted on it, and that gives you the shared reverb. So that's a brief overview of how to use a shared reverb channel and send individual tracks to that channel using auxiliary sends over buses.